はい。Hold actually. So, this is the Academia Gothica malware show with Tired Goth. I'm Tired Goth. Thank you for joining me. For those of you who did not think that I actually lived up to my brand and spoke Mandarin, yes. Yes. Get on my level. I'm glad to see you here. Today's malware show is going to be covering a paper here. Okay, so just for reference purposes, for those of you who don't know how the malware show works, I usually don't read the papers before showing up and reading them to you. So I too have no idea what's going on until I do. So you're welcome to join in. So I understand that someone's trying to usurp my voice with magic, because I got a reading done on that, and I would like for you to immediately stop. This is my show. This is my voice. This is what I do with my voice. Thank you. Yeah, I can feel what you're doing, and it's not working. Okay, cool. So here we are. Today's episode is going to be about Maelstrom, the EDR kernel callback, hook, and call stack paper. So this is hosted by none other than VX Underground. Check them out. You want to go there and get all of your malware papers, research papers, documents. Thank you for joining. And any other things here that would be like showcased, I guess you could say. They have live samples there. They have just about everything. They're pretty great. So go check them out. And 太感謝 to VX Underground for hosting a majority of the papers that I actually read here. So thank you for joining my live. So the paper introduction starts with, to recap the series so far, we've gone from looking at the high-level purposes and intentions of a command and control server, which we will get to in a second, as well as the general design and implementing our first iteration of our implant and server. If you've been following along, you might think you've written a C2. So this is technically something to be written out as a script in order to design something that's supposed to be pinging back to a command and control server. So for those of you who don't know what CNC or command and control efforts are, it's basically taking information that is present elsewhere and putting it in a funnel kind of thing to bring over to another server. This server exists outside of what's already present and can basically be used by anyone who's manning the server. So if that server property or those authorizations for use are handed off to another person, that person then owns the command and control server, and this is something that can be bought and sold as such. So if your information is being sent over to a command and control server and you don't know anything about it, the ownership can change hands fairly quickly without you even being privy to anything. So it's kind of important to pay attention to things like this. It says also here, this is a common mindset. In our experience, getting to this point does not require much sophistication. All of our previous work could easily be achieved and has been achieved using C#, Python, Go, and an evening's worth of frenetic caffeine-fueled typing. For those of you who don't know what C languages are hard-coded languages. You have to manually type things in by the number, by the value, by what else is here. Thank you for joining, Scarface. Essentially, what you would be doing is bringing all of the data that you'd be concerned with on your desktop, your computer, or your device into manually inputted format. So it would kind of be like, instead of typing, XYZ and then star to collect data and then put it into one place, you would actually have a whole bunch of serialized data. Like you would have this value here, comma, this value here, comma, this one, all separated by commas and or parentheses as the value set. And then you would take slices from this as well. So C is a programming language that requires you to know the specifications for certain things in order to continue on from where you are. So it's not like Python. It's not really like, you know, any web development languages like Ajax, which also does big data handling and things like that. That's more of an HTML and like a markup type of thing, but Ajax also does backend a bit. It like touches down. So that's like the Google language that you'd be using to develop your web pages and so on. You would also have other hard-coded language, like any Haskell languages. You would have C, which is usually like simplified C. Then you have C#. You have C++, which is more common. C++ is used for like inclusive programming. What else is there? You would have stuff like BASIC, like old BASIC from the 70s. You would have other banking languages, which I'm not going to disclose here because that would be dangerous. But, you know, like stuff that is commonly used for other stuff. I understand that some of you might be thinking Cobalt maybe, but Cobalt is also C-based if I'm not mistaken. So, so you have like C-based languages like Cobalt. You have other things. So just to encapsulate it, like it's not Python. It's not I don't know what other big data languages are. I think Python's like the one, like that's the one that everyone knows. So then you also have the rest of this paper that's leading into, you know, what the purpose of setting up the command and control server is. It says, but as we found when writing our various C2s and as numerous other offensive developers have found when writing their own implants and servers, once you have the code working and you can get a ping back, meaning your computer's here, you know, this is your remote server. These two are talking to each other. So if you get a ping back from the server, then you end up with a function. You end up with a callback function that you can put in there. And essentially, like, if you have that, you can start developing from there because at least you have like live feedback from both. But the thing is, it says here, once you stop running your implant on your development computer and try it on a second computer. So you actually ping two different boxes. Like you have one set up and then you move to the next one. And it says, this is where the questions start creeping in. Questions like, why can't I access remote files? Why can't I make outbound requests over this protocol but not this? Why does the command just fail with no explanation? And for the cynical self-doubter with enough imposter syndrome, why isn't Defender stopping me from doing this? Okay, so now we're talking about things that complicate the pingbacks, the communication, and all other things here. The reason this is, because I've done this before. So if you, not this specifically, but like the communications aspect and networking, when you have two different servers relaying the same thing, but they have to be like slightly modified, there are documents that generate as a result of these communications. And if there are duplicates in those communications, you actually get a really awkward like double ping kind of thing going on where like you have the connection there, but then like you can't access certain things because it's reserved for one specific file request through that. And then when it's duplicated, it's almost like it's trying to overwrite something. So you'll have a couple of different issues going on at the same time with this. That's, I want to say for Windows, it's usually an INI file. So it's .ini. I'm not that much more familiar with Windows, but .ini files and also non-Windows files. I think it's just like a generated text file. Thank you so much for joining. Hi. 早上好. So Shanghai. So yes, hi, ni hao ma. Thank you for the hearts. Ni hao ma. It was good to see you here. So yes, going back to this, we have the remote servers that are, contacting one another, but also overriding one another in this contact. So setting up those servers can have that as something that plugs into the issue and makes it more difficult for the two machines to actually discuss things with each other and thus transfer files to one another. So from this point, we also have why isn't Defender stopping me from doing this? The reason being is that if there are errors in the communications, it will actually cause a network breakdown as well. So you'll have a lot of errors, you'll have a lot of bugs that trip on account of it. If files get deleted or have to be replaced, then it may actually lead into other security issues. I mean, it could be anything. It literally could be anything. But then you also have, this personally is the post we were looking forward to writing. It's going to be a discussion with a few examples of increasing common behaviors with environments with active endpoint protection. Endpoint protection is this. Let's encapsulate it. You have a server, you have a remote access point, and then you also have another remote access point theoretically built on a command control server. So you have the home server, you have the remote server, and then you have another remote server. This is where those end-to-end point connections would be. You would have this endpoint and then another endpoint here, and they would have encryption, theoretically, some sort of protected, like, linear connection to one another in order to transfer data, right? And then you also have this home server and this one that is also separate. These also have endpoint to endpoint connections and therefore protections as well. Between these two, who are two separate servers, you may run into, I guess you could say, different issues, right? You would have this one connected to the main server, this one connected to the main server, but there's no guaranteed contact between these two unless it's attempted to be established, and even then, we don't necessarily know exactly how that works. So we don't know how it works until it's programmed. It needs to be written in, I should say. So we have this, and then there's the behaviors that sort of tie in with this when it comes to ensuring that the connection isn't broken, that the end-to-end encryption and protection isn't necessarily disturbed. So we go on to the paper that says, the implant and the C2 operator must be prepared to face or evade this scrutiny, and the defender must be aware of how it works so that it can be used to the best of its ability. So here, we have the context now that the defender actually raises problems with the function of this. And it could be because if there is no endpoint to endpoint connection established as encrypted, which was presumed to be, then you can run into issues that way. So we now have, in a nutshell, proof of execution is not proof of evasion. I want to say that again. Proof of execution is not proof of evasion. Meaning that if evasion means to scurry away, like generally the term of this means to scurry away, to run away, or to create some sort of elusiveness, like you're able to navigate away from something. The proof of execution is not, meaning the action of something being printed or written in writing to prove that it was done. You get a command feedback back saying this was done. It doesn't mean that it was actually done. It doesn't mean that it actually created the endpoint to endpoint connection that you were desiring. So if you were looking for a specific type of endpoint to endpoint function, it may not actually be responding properly, is what this is. So it says this post will cover setting up the hunting ELK, which I have no idea what it is. I have no idea what this is yet. Reviewing 3 ways EDRs can detect or block malicious execution, kernel callbacks, this I know, hooking, and thread call stacks. Okay, so kernel callbacks, for those of you who are unaware of what a kernel is the I guess you could say the opening point where the operating system is able to flourish and kind of, become, how could you say it? Like, it's able to open up its file sets and then like unravel itself into the operating system where you have pictures, you have graphics, you have buttons, you have functions that are tied to certain things that would be around and available for use. Thank you for joining. And you would then use this to just operate. So if, for example, the best example I have of a kernel like unfolding and doing what it does is the XZM files in Arch Linux. So if you have ever used Arch, then you would know that the .xzm files have to load one by one. They're called modules. So these modules start from a kernel point where you select what it is that you want to boot, be it from a disk, a hard drive. It could be local, it could be installed, it could be portable, whatever it is. You end up opening these files one by one. It'll say like, this .xzm loading opened, and then this .xzm loading opened, and then it'll like unpack each one, and then your operating system boots from there. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about the kernel callbacks once the operating system is active and it's taking like information from that and then sending information back and forth at the kernel level, meaning it's actually beneath the operating system as the operating system is as a whole. It's something that influences the operations within that system, is more the way to put it. So you have the kernel callbacks from whatever is being written. You have hooking, which is also appending files to one another and appending processes to one another. So this is something where you have the file process, it's already running, and then it can be set to latch on to another process that may or may not be related to what it is that's already there. So it's really dependent on what it is you're trying to run, what you're trying to write, and what they're going to be doing for you, like what the service process is. And then you also have thread call stacks. This has to do more or less with, I want to say block storage, right? I don't know this like 100% through. I'm very honest about what I know and I don't know. But the thread call stacks have to do with server level input and also like storage. So you're going to have server storage. You're going to have things that tie in with how the server processes requests and then where they put them. And then what it does for the machine, to the machine, or who it's speaking to with respect to those machines. So if we go back to the example where the bell is the home server, and then you have these two other remote servers that are functioning off of this one's commands, the thread call stack is going to be talking about the processes that are running parallel to one another or interconnected with one another. So threading is a word or term, I should say, used to describe the processes that are running, where they're running and for what they're running and what they're linked in with. So by the end of this post, we will have covered how modern EDRs can protect against malicious implants. Malicious implants could be a number of things that we're discussing here, but it's usually hardware, and how these protections can be bypassed. We will move from having an implant which technically works to an awareness of how to write an implant, which actually starts to work and can achieve the goals of an operator. As we've said many times, we're not creating an operational C2. The output from this series is poorly written and riddled with flaws. It only does enough to act as a broken proof of concept of the specific items we discuss in this series to avoid this code from being used by bad actors. So they did the smart thing and they spoofed this entire paper so that people couldn't actually emulate it. The reason why you don't want people to emulate your work is you would then be held responsible for the prototype. So they did the smart thing. They were like, let's just write a fake one and we'll show you what it's supposed to do. But we're not going to actually give you like the recipe. Like there's the recipe and then there's the recipe. They didn't give us the recipe. So, I mean, I relate. You're throwing out a decoy. There's nothing wrong with throwing out a decoy. You do it. You do it and you see what it does. But, They also went on to say in this paper, as we've said many times, we are not creating an operational C2. Oh, no. Okay. We just covered that. Sorry about that. Okay. So for the same reason, we are trying to avoid discussing red team operational tactics in this series. So they were like, we don't want to go to jail. We're not going to discuss the thing that makes us go to jail, but we'll give you some hints on how to do this, and then you can decide for yourself. You can weigh the scales with Maat. Amat, whoever that is, if you would like to go to jail. Be full of scrutiny, everyone. Okay. So they said it will become obvious why blending in with the compromised user's typical behavior will work. This is something that XPN has discussed on Twitter, and they went on to discuss this in an excerpt on Twitter, which is no longer Twitter. So this is interesting. We have a piece of history right here with us, everyone. So it's the find Confluence, read Confluence, become the employee quote from Adam Chester, and I guess this is their account XPN. I'm not familiar with this, so this is me learning too. If your implant has been flagged by EDR, querying net session idnom, so NETSESSION enum, which is short for enumerator. Every adjoined computer to find active sessions is probably not typical user behavior. You likely will not know your implant has been flagged until it stops responding. From here, it's a race until your implant is uploaded to VirusTotal and you have to go back to the drawing board. Okay, so what they're talking about here in this, I guess, excerpt is conceptual data about virus reporting. So we're talking about implants in software, I guess, too, because I was only familiar with the term implants for hardware, like someone soldering something to your chip or, creating some sort of bypass for authentication built into the chip to assure that even a password locked in via software was not enough to secure whatever it is it was protecting. There are also implants, I guess, that you can put into a software, but I thought they were called something else. I want to say they're called not bootloader. Well, okay, so a bootloader would be something that's like a housing for that. There's a word for it. I don't remember it. I will, but I don't remember it this second. But yes, okay. So it says here, for the sake of simplicity, we call all programs that are limited to scanning files on disk statically antivirus, and programs that go further and scan device memory. So this is sort of like an antivirus inspection type of thing where it goes into static processes which don't inherently store data. Thank you for joining, B. They don't inherently store data. They kind of just repackage it with the same startup thing, but without the previous processes, if that makes sense. Like, you can save information, but it won't necessarily load in the way that it did. And then you also have the behavior of the programs while they're running. So these are active system processes, and then responding to threats as they happen, EDRs. So me personally, I did not understand that as English, but that's okay because I'm learning with you too. So, let's see, responding to threats as they happen with EDRs. So these may be called various names, including XDR, MDR, and just plain AV. Okay. So now I know what we're talking about. We're talking about antivirus, the something. But okay, XDR, MDR are variations of what it is that you're looking for, but they're broken down by block type. So you're gonna have, I know the abbreviations, I'm just totally not remembering what the whole name is. So we're not gonna do that. So XDR, for example, could be the XOR block, right? We're talking about servers, we're talking about low level maintenance, we're talking about the actual byte files where these things are stored. So you have storage blocks in each compartment. And before we really get into this paper, because usually we don't finish the papers for the malware show, I leave that to you guys based on your interest. But the way that this goes is like, okay, if I go into a storage block here in TermUX, right? Just to give you an idea of what the actual process looks like. If I open this up, I open a tray and go into a folder, stuff like this, and I don't know if you could see this, but like this is a PS listing. The PS listing is a process listing for active processes. You can find things that are active and running this way, but you can also cd ... into files that predate or preset into the nested file that you were just in. So basically, like, okay, you're here, right? This is the file folder that you're in by default, and then going into a cd ... callback brings you into the room where you're drinking out of your coffee cup. That is your file storage. So it kind of like brings you from one location into the file that you're nested inside of, and then if you keep doing that, you go into the previous files. So be sure to tap that screen and send a bunch of hearts like this if you're interested in what I'm talking about or you find this fun. So I'm gonna go into the cd ... twice, and then I'm gonna type ls. Now, okay, here you get to see file paths, right? Or at least you see folders. So I typed cd and ls. ls is short for list. So ls is going to list you a series of folders that are nested in the folder that you're sitting in, and they're going to go by different names. So for example, if I go into lib, so I type cd lib with a space in between, I enter the lib folder. And if I type ls in the lib folder, it's going to show me .so files for this particular file set. So these are executable files. They're not ISO files, but they are extensions of the SO file set. And essentially, like, I don't know exactly what these do, but what I can do is type nano lib local -socket to get into this one to see what it looks like. And as you can see, this is the ELF file, right? So this is actually what the code looks like when the machine is reading it. Now, we don't know how to read ELF unless we're familiar with what ELF decrypts to in byte sizes, in byte storage, and anything like that. So for example, if I came up to you and I said, oh my god, caret question mark ELF, caret A, caret A, caret A, caret A, caret @ sign, caret @ sign, caret @ sign, caret @ sign, would you know what the hell I was talking about? Because I'm sure you wouldn't unless you were familiar with what each of those things meant. But this is the entire first string, or at least an excerpt of it, of this ELF file that is a .so file. So the ELF is the component file that builds something, and this is actually what the storage looks like in text, right? So I'm gonna X out of this by going Control 0, not Control 0, wow, Control O. Yes, I'm using Nano, I'm avoiding the text editor wars. Leave me out of it. We're gonna press Control T and Control Z. I forgot that Control O is the save mechanism, and we're not supposed to overwrite those files, because anyway. So Control T and Control Z brings us back out into this menu here, right? And then from here, thank you for joining, we have the ls option again. I'm actually gonna cd and then just type enter, right? So cd enter brings you to the home default folder for what it is this terminal uses as its home space. So this is something that we can do now. We can type cd ... and this brings us to two folders, home and user, right? So for home and user, what we want to do is type ls, oh sorry, not ls, we want to type cd user. So USR is how user is spelled in this context. So we type cd, space USR, thank you for joining, and then we type ls. ls brings us to several folders. We have bin, etc, include, lib, libexec, share, temp, which is spelled TMP, and then var for the var folder. The var folder in a lot of Linux-based or GNU plus Linux-based operating systems, including Android, is the crucial thing to use because var teaches you where your information is in the storage blocks and sometimes has a component influence on where the storage really is. So you have a lot of installations in the var folder. It's super important to know where those are. Also, if you're interested in tipping me because you've learned today, send some love to my Cash App. I'm very interested in having new bookies for my classes, so come be my clients for sure. I teach all of this stuff in depth. This is just a malware show for funsies because I like this. I like this kind of stuff. It's fun for me. So we're in the USR file, and then we're going to CD into var. So CD space VAR, and then we're gonna see these things here. So there's a games folder, an htop folder, there's a lib folder, a log folder, and a run folder. So I'm going to be spicy and go into the run folder. So I'm going to type cd run and then ls, and it doesn't appear that anything is here. So now I'm going to argue with it and say lsa, and I see two folders, but they're subdirectories and they appear to be empty. So now I'm going to back out with cd ... and go back to the grouping here. So I'm going to type cd htop and see if these are active processes that are stored in here. So there's something called stat. Stat is like the printout of the active processes. So we don't really need to do anything with that because it's not going to show us the storage blocks per se. But what we can do is go into the lib folder here and see if there's anything in here. So now we have the apt and dpackage folders. Those are installation files and they're folders, but they're not really what we need. We might actually want to CD even further back twice and press ls to get back into, I want to say it's the etc file. So let's go, oh wait, no, it's not. Let's go into bin, cd bin. And there we go. We have a whole list of like installed processes, things that are crucial for the machine. And we want to get an idea of like where these things are. So let's treat them as folders. Some of these are like processes that just run as applications. Like you can type the names of these and they'll start running on the machine. So let's actually type a CD and see if they actually redirect us into any of these as if they're file folders. They probably do. But let's try, like, for example, if we go into cd dump sex p. I don't know what that is, but dump sex p might be like dump sextile or sextuplet files. It's not a directory. Okay, so now we have clarification on what is and what isn't. So anything green looks like it's not a directory, and then anything blue, I guess, is. So let's go into zst data, which is abbreviated as zst-dat. None of these are, in fact, file folders yet. Okay. They may not ever be. I shouldn't have said yet. But, okay, so long story short, if we get into the folder here where we go, let's try like include, right? cd include, and then, yeah, there we go. So now we have the .h files. These are executable files that you would be calling, right? And theoretically, you would also have folders that are housing them. So you have like cd proc, for example. So you have the slab files, allocation files, dev name files, escape files, version files. You have like time calls and considerations and things like this. So, okay, going back, once you get the idea of like what it is that you're looking at, you get the idea of where the storage blocks are. And there are actually files that have this information available to you. Like you can literally open the files and see like where their storage blocks are. But I actually don't know where these are here yet. So just bear with me. We're going to go back to the paper now. But yeah, what do we mean by endpoint detection and response? So now we know what EDR is. Endpoint detection and response. Endpoint detection response software goes by a number of different acronyms. Oh, we've read this already. So because it's relevant to post, the next section will look at EDR architecture and comparing EDR behaviors across various vendors. Without going hugely off topic, we won't look at a number of also relevant ideas, such as how antivirus works and how disk space protection may work to also stymie your implant execution if you're running it on disk, and how AV and EDR, endpoint detection, endpoint detection and response, endpoint detection and response, actually goes without scanning files and their behaviors while they are doing so. It turns out that's like a whole field of study. Okay. Thanks so much for joining. So, we also have a chart here that shows the web security cloud and some other things. It's a bit of a diagram that will point out what it is that we would be seeking in terms of a flow chart of data. So if we have like, the EDR, the endpoint detection, I guess you could say nucleus, right? You would then have things pointing to when that would be effective. So you have the security web cloud, and then that's where it connects there. You have the email security thing. So these are also protocols, right? So for email, you'd have like SMTP. For instant messaging or text messaging, you'd most likely have OMACP. You would also have adversary intelligence feeds through, I guess you could say like any type of web browser or whatever feed, and then also there would be ports for this, I guess, assigned to this. This could also be a separate command and control server set up to funnel poisonous or threatening data to this location. And there's a file analysis, there's like an endpoint detection relay, and so on and so forth. And it says here, a similar approach can be seen for Defender for endpoint. Essentially, a device with the product installed will have an agent which can consist of several drivers and processes which gather telemetry from various aspects of the machine, though this post and the next will go over a few of those. As an aside, in a Windows environment, Microsoft inherently may have an edge here. While this is currently aimed at large enterprise customers, or at least we assume, given their price point for Azure, which is a server host maintenance service, and it's sort of like what AWS is. Like Azure is a supportive thing as far as I can tell. There's Azure, there's like Apache, there's server hosting and maintenance. So when Microsoft's Defender and new Defender MDE can both access Microsoft's knowledge of their own operating system, but also influence the development of new operating system functionality. Long term, it wouldn't be a surprise to see Microsoft Defender impacted the antivirus market. So this is also talking about like Microsoft Defender, the history of McAfee as an antivirus software, kind of like tangentially looped into this too, because a lot of these antivirus softwares, whether they were open source or closed source, proprietary or not, have been servicing people who have been interested in looking into AV and like antivirus related software stuff. So there's AV, which is the antivirus itself. It's the detection. It's the module that actually runs the scans. And then you have other things that tie in with the post process of antivirus software. So if you, for example, have a virus detection like ClamAV or Windows Defender or a firewall that you built yourself through Yara or something like this, you could actually then tie in a post scan process with this. And this is sort of like you writing in, okay, so if XYZ detected, then da-da-da. And it's sort of like an artificially intelligent scan and direction kind of thing that you can use for this. We're going to skip down to page 4, where it says, for the excessively curious reader, me, the following links go into more detail about specific vendor approaches to the EDR architecture. And it brings up something that says, the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Gartner's May 2021 report, which is serving here, as it states, a map out of the EDR landscape. And it's worth noting that CrowdStrike's hire of Alex Ionescu, who's the maintainer for the kernel in ReactOS, demonstrates the current best-in-class EDR heavily leveraged knowledge of internal Windows functionality to maximize their performance. So ReactOS is, it's an operating system. I've never used it. I've heard about it. Thank you for joining, Erica. So there's, if we're talking about the Magic Quadrant as well, I'd like to say that this is a mathematical equation also related to the Diffie-Hellman encryption method, but I'm not 100% on that, so don't quote me on that. But if I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to be like wherever there is one connection and another connection and then a tertiary connection, there is then an extra amount that quantifies the connection between the three in a triangulated communication, if that makes sense. And in the case that there is a triplicate communication option where they can each ping back to one another, there is a fourth fold of the math that accommodates how those interactions may equate to a positive encryption and data enumeration. So in simple terms, it's sort of like this bell and this connection point, if we're doing EDR, this connection point and this connection point have one value set to it. This connection point and this connection point also have another value point assigned and set to it. When they're all talking to one another, pinging back and forth, this one and this one and this one and this one, that creates a separate value set. And then the enumeration of them all is the fourth technical set. However, it could also be that a Magic Quadrant is a Boolean value that accommodates for something. I'm not sure if I explained that just the way that it was in my head, because I had read a previous malware paper about this, which avoided some sort of a malware attack based on the math that was done to accommodate the space necessary to fully encrypt what could be there. And I just want to make sure that that's clear. I can link this this paper at some point in the follow-up and playback on YouTube, so you have reference points for this as well. And this is not my own paper. I did not write this paper, keep in mind, but this is the Maelstrom EDR paper and report on the AV software here. And this is actually attributed to pre.emt.dev. That's the website. You can go to them and look up the Maelstrom EDR kernel callbacks and hooks and call stacks paper. So I'm actually going to wrap this paper up, but rather like any type of math that involves like quadrants has to do with accommodating negative space, I feel. It has to do with accommodating what has not been yet calculated and the accommodations necessary to allow that to flow in nicely. So there is that. And thank you for joining. So this has been Tired Goth. I apologize for ending the show just as you're getting here, but this has been the Malware Show, and you can watch the playback over at youtube.com/@tiredg0thox. And you can follow me over there. You can subscribe to my channel. You can send your likes, your hearts. I'm very grateful. Send myself a few hearts here. You can tap the screen to send your hearts as you're here. But this has basically been the Malware Show that's going to be posted over there, so feel free to join me over there. And thank you so much for tuning in for this paper. You will also have the source for this paper to read it yourself and to get an idea of what it is that you may have been here for or missed in the case that you just joined. So thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for your hearts. Thank you for the gifts that you've sent during my live shows. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your follows. Thank you so much for supporting me as a creator and as a girl in STEM. I love you guys. Thanks so much. So long. Bye.